Thank you, everyone, for joining all of us for a time outside of our normal briefing. Today we're gathering together, a group of us, to share more about our commitment at the executive branch with police and sheriffs and the TBI for a series of immediate policy changes that will be enacted. We're announcing a review of the use of force and duty to intervene policies, improved information sharing across all law enforcement agencies, and an increase in officer training requirements. The steps that we're outlining today are just a starting point for what we hope will be an enhanced approach to law enforcement across our state. But before we get into the details, there are several guests with us here today that I want to acknowledge and thank you for being here. And in a few minutes, some of them will share perspectives, but in the meantime, I'm honored to have with us Police Director Mike Rawlings, Post-Commission Chairman and Knox County Sheriff Tom Spangler, Tennessee Highway Patrol Colonel Derek Stewart, and TBI Director David Roush. I also want to thank members of the Post-Commission who are here, the Tennessee Associations of Police Chief President and Germantown Police Chief Richard Hall, Tennessee Sheriff Association President and Montgomery County Sheriff John Fuson, Commissioner Long from our Tennessee Department of Safety and Homeland Security. These men and women represent the very best of the profession, and they model the discipline and the courage and the servant heart that it takes to embrace a vital and often thankless role. Thank you all for being here today. The timing and the intent of this partnership reflects a desire to ensure that law enforcement are consistently on the side of the communities that they serve. Tragic, preventable events across this country have caused all of us to confront the difference between law enforcement and police brutality, and challenged us as well to examine troubling, inconsistent citizen experiences with law enforcement. I want to be clear in my deep appreciation and commitment to the role of law enforcement in our communities. There is a vast difference between meaningful reform and meaningless attempts to defund the police or any other unrealistic approach that misses the mark on both advancing justice and strengthening interaction with the communities that they serve. In Tennessee, we've opted for a better way, one that recognizes the need for a highly professional, skilled force that demands at the same time that every Tennessean's rights, dignity, and humanity be at the forefront of policing. In conjunction with Department of Safety, Department of Commerce and Insurance, Association of Chiefs of Police, TBI, Highway Patrol, and the Sheriff's Association, we're calling on every law enforcement agency in the state to review and update their use of force and duty to intervene policies within the next 60 days. Use of force policies, by reviewing and improving these policies, we ensure that both the law enforcement agency and the communities that they serve utilize best practices from training within the context of their work. Use of force policies should be reviewed and updated to ensure, for example, that chokeholds are not used as a restraining technique. Duty to intervene policies will be reviewed and updated to require officers to act to prevent, to stop any act, even by other officers, that violate law or policy. Peer-to-peer accountability is oversight in real time, and I'm proud of these leaders for setting the expectation that chain of command is not an excuse to turn a blind eye to dangerous behavior. Through this partnership, we're also heightening accountability through better information sharing. The National Decertification Index is a registry that tracks officers who've lost licenses due to misconduct. In conjunction with the Post-Commission, we're making sure that agencies all across the state have access to this information to be sure that officers that have proven unfit for service don't find themselves a refuge in another department. Professionalism ensures quality, safe interactions between law enforcement and citizens. At the state level, we provide training for city, county, and state law enforcement officers through the TLEADA, the Tennessee Law Enforcement Training Academy. Since 1966, more than 54,000 officers have trained through TLEADA. And policing has certainly changed since that organization, that facility was started. And we want to make sure that continuous improvement continues right on into 2020. We're formalizing the Training Academy curriculum to add an additional 88 hours of training and study to boost the minimum requirement of 488 hours that currently exists for all officers. The curriculum will also be updated to include no fewer than 16 hours of instructional time dedicated to de-escalation techniques, intervention and appropriate interactions with public assembly, like protests. This coursework is designed to instill in officers early on that professionalism is rooted in a community-minded approach. As I said earlier, the steps I've outlined now are just the beginning, they're first steps, but the integrity of our justice system depends on a foundation of doing right all the time, and that begins with our agencies. I offer my full support of law enforcement, and I want to commend the men and women in uniform for not growing weary of doing good. I've invited several of our partners to speak. First, I'd like for Director Rawlings to come up and share your comments, please.
Thank you, Governor. Good afternoon. I am Michael Rawlings, the Director of the Memphis Police Department. But today, I represent the Tennessee Chiefs of more than 17,000 officers from across this great state. We're in full support of Governor Lee's recommendations to continue to move Tennessee law enforcement forward. The Tennessee Association of Chiefs of Police has a long history of supporting professional law enforcement through quality training, advancement of law enforcement policies and accreditation, procedural integrity, and advocating for constitutional policing practices. The Tennessee Police Chiefs Association has committed to working together to review policies and enhance best practices statewide. In addition to the governor's initiatives, we pledge to collaborate on the following. Number one, assure all agencies follow Tennessee state law to report the use of deadly force and serious bodily injury to TBI and the FBI. Number two, encourage and support law enforcement agency accreditation. Number three, strengthening hiring and background practices and resources to employ the right officers in our Tennessee agencies. And number four, encourage community involvement and community outreach. There's nothing more important in law enforcement than integrity and trust. We value these principles and believe positive reforms improve our agencies, public safety, and for the communities we serve and protect, build those relationships. Although we provide services within our own jurisdictions, the Tennessee Association of Chiefs of Police stand ready to assist all law enforcement agencies statewide. We look forward to working with our communities, government leaders, additional stakeholders, and anyone that is willing to sit at the table with us. We will continue to move Tennessee law enforcement forward. And thank you, Governor.
Sheriff Spangler.
Thank you, Governor. We're honored to be here today, and thank you all for being here. I'm Tom Spangler. I am the chairman of the Post Commission, the Police Officer Standards and Training Board, and also the Sheriff of Knox County. What our position as a post member, and we have several of our members here, and I want to thank them for being here, which is comprised of either sheriffs, chiefs, our senators, our former DAs, other officers. Those people right there are responsible for any and all training that goes out within this state of Tennessee to all law enforcement officers. We are the governing body that makes sure that the training that is being presented to our officers is up to date and also mandated. So we can't compromise on anything like that. What the governor has said here today is what is the responsibility as the post is to be sure that we put that information in writing and then it's followed by. And those agencies have that information and those academies get that time within the allotted time that they have during those academies. So we want to make sure as a post commission that we do those things for our agencies across the state of Tennessee. Any of the officers that the governor had mentioned as far as decertification, those come to us as well. So we have those hearings. So we have a huge responsibility within the post commission, and as being the sheriff and the chairman on that board and being appointed by the governor, I take that position very seriously, and we want to make sure as a post commission that the recommendations that the governor has made here today, that they're followed through. And with that, I want to say to the governor, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Colonel Stewart.
Governor, thank you for the opportunity to be here today and speak with you about use of force this afternoon. Recently, I directed the overall review of our use of force policies for the Tennessee Highway Patrol to ensure that our practices, other departments, are consistent with the best practices across law enforcement throughout the country. This review was measured against the policies against those of the IACP, the International Association of Chiefs of Police, the State Police Academy Directors, and the National Tactical Officers Association. In 2017, 11 agencies and organizations comprised of the most significant law enforcement leadership and labor agencies in the United States. They developed the National Consensus Policy and Discussion Paper on Use of Force. This policy reflects the best thinking of all the consensus agencies and was used as a template to help prepare and write the policy for the THP. I am happy to report today that the review that has been completed and reveals that our policies and our training contains the necessary guidelines to ensure the best practices of our agency and of our members are being carried out. Our training curriculum banned the use of chokeholds many years ago, but our policy review revealed that our policy was silent on this particular subject. I have ordered the immediate rewrite and revision of the general order to address this oversight, and which will clearly prohibit the use of chokeholds unless deadly force is authorized. It is important to note that the actions of the individuals that led to the murder of George Floyd are not consistent with any professional law enforcement agency anywhere. The increased scrutiny of law enforcement today is understandable, and the expectations of those that wear the badge are high. We accept this high standard. As a goal, we continue to provide the highest level of leadership in public safety today. Thank you.
Thank you for each of you and who you represent and what you represent. And what this represents is a commitment that we have to elevating a conversation that is important, especially today. Given the events and the elevated conversation over the last several weeks in this country, we want to be certain that we have a commitment in this state to our citizens, to our communities, to the interaction between our law enforcement agencies and our communities. And I did not call on TBI Commissioner Rouse. There you are, Director Rouse. You took all my closing comments. Come up. I'm really sorry you didn't, and that's my oversight. You're my man.
Yes, it's A-okay, Governor. It's all right. I do want to thank the governor for what he has shared today, and I want to express my personal appreciation for his dedicated and strong support for professional law enforcement in our great state. We in law enforcement welcome this conversation and are prepared to work toward improvement. As the governor has expressed, we all understand the importance of the rule of law and the role that law enforcement fulfills. The need to assure that it is done with integrity and transparency is critical. I'm humbled to stand here with my peers from local and state law enforcement, which includes the representatives that you've heard from the TACP, the Tennessee Sheriff's Association. I know the sheriff was pulling double hats there, and Post, as well as THP, as we work to improve our profession. I have the honor to serve as the director of the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, the state's independent investigative agency. Our mission is to assure that guilt shall not escape nor innocence suffer. This holds especially true in cases involving law enforcement. Accountability is our core function. We support the recommendations, especially those on training, policies, and procedures. It's important to understand that good policy needs to be trained to create good procedures. The TBI stands ready to assist all law enforcement in the state with this effort. Additionally, the Bureau has the responsibility as the repository of law enforcement data for the state. This includes the statutory collection of law enforcement use of deadly force that results in serious bodily injury or death as required under TCA 3810-102. Tennessee is a leader in that arena throughout the country, and we submit the data to the national database at the FBI. We also provide a report of this data annually at the end of March. We support the effort to assure that all agencies are properly reporting and will assist any agency in this state with this as well. Lastly, I hope this message from the governor and each of us today leads to further positive interactions between our communities and law enforcement in Tennessee. In the words of Maya Angelou, we are more alike, my friends, than we are unalike. Thank you. We wish you a healthy, safe, and happy Independence Day. Thanks.
Do we have any more? Again, thanks to you all. And as I said, it's timely conversation. It's an elevated conversation that needs to be had. But as Director Rollins and I met a couple weeks ago and talked about the need to make policy changes immediately that are clear and that we can institute right away, it's only a beginning. We need to begin to have and will have interaction with law enforcement across the state, interaction with community leaders and community groups across the state in an effort to make certain that Tennessee's law enforcement interaction with the communities is the best that we can be, that we can be a state that shows other states how to do it. I think we have the professionalism in our agencies to do that, but this is an appropriate time for us to be elevating and continuing this conversation, and this is just the beginning, but we're grateful for this start and grateful for the partnership that's been put together here today. So we're happy to answer any questions, and certainly these folks are available as well. That's right. We will. This partnership will develop the oversight for that 60 days, but that process will begin as of now.
Chris, I have a question for Sheriff Spangler, if you don't mind. It's from your folks at WATE. I'd love to see you up at the podium. And the question is about the mask mandate that came down from your health department. My understanding, I'm reading on your website, that you have said, my office is not going to enforce this policy. Can you tell us why?
That's not what I said, but, and I hope they can see me from here. what I had said, there was some serious concern about the constitutionality of it, and they still haven't gotten the order down to us yet. So there's no, the order is now within the law department, and the law department is having some concerns with it. So there's an issue with it right now, so that's part of why we have questions with it.
So you're waiting to make that decision about whether or not you'll enforce this?
Well, as I said, once we find out the constitutionality of it, we will. But I don't want to take away from what we're doing here today, so I'll be glad to talk to you away from here with that if you want to.
Okay,
Good.
passed on by the vote.
Sure. Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you. Sorry, I didn't mean to take up everybody's time.
You're good.
Yes, Governor. In light of these efforts to reform the police use of violence or use of force and so forth, the ACLU is complaining that the peaceful protesters were arrested Monday morning by PHP and some of their items seized, and they're demanding that those items be returned. Is this an effort to change that and stop arresting what they say were peaceful protesters? I mean, how does this mesh with that?
Yeah, well, I'll let Commissioner Long address the specifics of that incident, but this is about broad policy change across all agencies. And we certainly address the interaction between law enforcement and those groups, but I'm not aware of any inappropriate action that was taken by the state troopers in that process, so I can't speak to that. I can't speak to the specifics of what you're asking. There is clearly training, enhanced training on tap for all of our agencies in their interaction with gatherings, including protests.
Well, I guess the question is, if you're focusing on building rapport and community policing and improving relationships between police and the public, why have PHP go arrest what they say?
Well, we need to be clear, when laws are broken, people will be held accountable for breaking laws. This is about appropriate interaction between law enforcement and citizens. As I said, I can't speak to that specific incident because I wasn't there. I'm not aware of any inappropriate action by Highway Patrol in that incident. If you have anything to add to that.
Thank you for the question. From the onset, the THP has been supportive of the protesters. We have not arrested a single solitary person for protesting. We enforce the laws that apply to the grounds of the Capitol and Legislative Plaza governing camping. Those individuals that were arrested for camping on state property, and others that were arrested for trespassing. No one has been arrested for protesting. We have charged our troopers from day one that we support every individual's right, constitutional right, to support protesters, and we're going to allow that. We will protect them and defend them. We will not tolerate illegal activity, though. Thank you.
Governor, I've got a couple of questions about today's announcement, and totally unrelated, and that will be easy for you. How's the decertification index going to work? Will all current employees have to go through the system, and if there are people who are decertified in, say, Florida that came here 10 years ago, will they be, taken off the employee roll?
Tom, you want to speak to that process? Can you answer that question?
Is when they come to post, the agency comes to post and they're asking for decertification, then that information is kept. And then if somebody goes somewhere else and they try that, then obviously they contact the state of Tennessee and we're able to furnish that information for them. I think now with the larger database that the governor has talked about will help even across the state even more. I think where we do a disservice is not letting, or agencies not letting other agencies know that they have a problem, and it's kind of just pushed on, but I think now with this being implemented, you'll see more of the decertification stick more than the way it has. That decertification has come through post, has always been there, but it's going to enforce more from across the state.
And so again, just to be clear, will it be a backwards review or only going forward?
We will talk about that, and we can probably make it go backwards and look at that just to make sure.
And then, Governor, what about the rest of these changes? Let's say, you mentioned the peer-to-peer accountability, right? Let's say that doesn't happen. Let's say an officer sees somebody and then doesn't speak up or stop them. What's the accountability mechanism?
Yeah, you know, a lot of what we're talking about today is a first step. This is the policy that we want to implement. There will be a lot of interaction, and we've just developed the desire for what we want to happen, how each of these steps will be enforced, how each of them will be carried out. That'll be a part of this, of the collaboration of this partnership going forward. So, like I said, this is step one. That's the goal, and we'll put in place, you know, policy that will enforce the desire to have that oversight.
And then my last question for you is turning to a different subject. The elections are coming up. Early voting starting in just a couple of weeks. We've seen a host of problems in other states, ranging from online super sites, you know, people not getting their absentee ballots when they request it. How confident are you that Tennessee's going to see a smooth election if it can, or is this unusual time?
Well, I know in speaking with the Secretary of State, there's been a lot of work done and watching what's happening in other states to try to alleviate and to look at the challenges they've had and the mistakes they've made so that we don't make them. We certainly feel confident. We're hopeful. We believe that we have a process that's looked at the mistakes that have been made across other states, and we hope that our outcomes will be better. Certainly hopeful for that. Yep.
Let's go here for the last question.
Yes, talk about the next steps, of course, with this partnership going forward. Anything else on your agenda to look at changing some of the things throughout our state?
I think the next steps are going to be to develop, as Joel suggested there, to develop the next steps in making certain that these first announcements can be enforced and implemented and upheld, that they will become consistent across all departments, that we communicate that we put in place a process that makes sure that everything we've announced today will actually come to be over the next 60 days in the one case, or appropriate time frame for all of the things. That's the next step, is develop the practices. But then, you know, this is a process that won't stop. I believe we've got to be committed to a never-ending process of change, continuous improvement in all of our policing efforts, and that will include engaging in a greater way with communities and listening to communities, listening to individuals, listening to having actually listening conversations across the state. Director Rollins and I talked specifically about that, and others that I've met with and talked to about how it is that we can take this desire to improve the interaction between and build trust between communities and law enforcement. That's really what we want to do here, is build trust. When citizens trust law enforcement in a greater way than they do now, then we'll have better interactions. And that'll happen by interacting with citizens in agencies across the state.
And just talking about a little off topic as well, fireworks were canceled here in Nashville. Any word of what you want to see, any changes throughout the rest of the state?
What I want to see is a serious commitment by Tennesseans to stopping the spread of COVID. We have a serious public health threat, as evidenced by increasing case counts in counties all over this state. We talked at length yesterday about the seriousness of that, about how important it is that small steps and little acts of service to neighbors, like wearing a mask and staying home when you're sick and washing your hands, the things that got us to a place where we could begin to move in our economy again, those are the same things that will keep us from taking 2 steps backwards. So as people approach this holiday weekend, they got to keep in mind that COVID's not taking a holiday. It is moving through our state, and it is very important that our citizens understand that and they think about that everywhere they go. We can travel safely, we can move about safely, we can interact with our businesses safely, but that takes individual responsibility to do that. So that would be my message to Tennesseans today. Thank you all. Appreciate it.